when you look at the concept of a crisis of knowledge, from a philosophical point of view, it's really based on how do you define the terms crisis and how do you define knowledge. The very fact that we know what a crisis is and we know what knowledge is, and you put those two together, it raises the big question mark. What do you mean crisis of knowledge? The important thing, like I said, is to, of course, define the terms. So what is our general definition of what is knowledge? Do we see knowledge as something that is, it's an object that needs to be pursued? Do we see it as something that we use as a tool? And I would say from a modern point of view, knowledge is perceived as a tool to be used. So any pursuit of knowledge generally is tied into the modern educational system, in which it is basically just to be used as a tool, either to build a career, to get a job, to whatever, to use as in terms of livelihood. But it's imperative that we go back to the early thinking of the Muslims, because that's where we derive our tradition from. How did they perceive knowledge? What did they look at in terms of what they require to earn their livelihood? And then in terms of how they want to cultivate their akhirah. And were they pursuing knowledge only for the purpose of cultivating their world here? Or were they actually pursuing knowledge for the sake of knowledge, for the sake of akhirah? Because the Quran teaches that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raises in rank His messengers, His awliya, and then people of knowledge. And they're put on the same rank. So I think that without getting too deep into the different concepts, it's imperative to distinguish between what is knowledge and what is base human intellect.
Sure.
Because the modern view is that...
So would you say that that's one of the big problems in itself? Like, before we've gone into it, you say that actually the definition of knowledge itself has been corrupted or changed. Is that what you say? That's problem one?
It would be, in that sense, it's corrupted, because the modern perception, of course, it goes back to whatever philosophies generally come from a secular point of view. Right? The human beings developed and evolved, and the intellect evolved with them, because we're the most intelligent species on the planet. So our knowledge is of our own concoction. We made that knowledge, we created that knowledge. So we've sort of brought the knowledge down to our level. And it's sort of an arrogant stance that human beings have taken.
Interesting.
And it's important to separate the two, so that we view knowledge as something of a rank by itself that we need to reach towards by our definition of saying seeking knowledge or looking for knowledge or acquiring knowledge. Right? Imam Malik said, and one needs to understand the Arabic because the translation doesn't really do it justice. He says, "Inna al-ilm yu'ti wa la ya'ti," that knowledge indeed is something that's it's acquired. So there's an effort towards acquiring it.
Yeah.
It's not bought, like it's not taken.
Traded or something,
Yeah, and the process of acquiring it means that somebody has to give it for you to take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's in terms of recognizing who it is that's giving us this knowledge.
Very good.
And defines it, right?
Definitely.
Quran, Allamahul Bayan, He's the one who is teaching it. Allah is the one who is teaching it. So this is something that we need to bring back into our way of thinking. As far as like the crisis of knowledge, I would say even then, the statement, although it is definitely factual to us, really knowledge itself is not in crisis. It's we who are in crisis. Knowledge itself is something that belongs to Allah. No one can corrupt knowledge in its essential.
Sure.
Because ultimately, when it comes to the end of humanity and Yawm al-Qiyamah, and the veil is lifted, we'll see everything as it should clearly be seen, irrespective of what corruption or whatever concoction we made up. So the actual crisis is we are in a crisis, human beings. And this is a spillover effect. When you look at things in a broader sense, one of the methodologies of solving algebraic equations is to typically look at the outcome and then try to work your way backwards. So if you look at the modern situation and try to work your way backwards, you'll see this incredible paradigm shift where traditionally work, earning a livelihood, was more trade and enterprise oriented individually, compared to today where we have a corporate system, a workforce system. So 90% is essentially 90% of the population is essentially in the workforce. So what's being set in the education system is not to encourage independency or to encourage free thinking or to encourage any sort of building yourself up, even though superficially it's always said out, we want to build small businesses and help small and all that. But it's essentially trying to get people into the workforce, and that's the education system.
Absolutely,
built for that. It's a workforce mentality. And the workforce mentality is you don't ask questions, you follow orders. That's the workforce mentality.
Yeah, of course.
The person who is there, the authority figure, he's the one who tells you what to do. And the same template is applied through and through. From the age of 4, that's essentially what you are indoctrinated for. You listen to the authoritative figure. You sit where you're supposed to sit. You come when you're supposed to come. You eat when you're supposed to eat. You go to the bathroom, you need to ask permission to go to the bathroom. You have to follow.
When the bell rings, you go to your next class.
You go to your next class, exactly. There's a signal that you have to follow. We could go further into the extreme of calling it a conspiracy theory, but that's the factual element there. That's exactly what we see. And that's what we went through. It wasn't until myself, also from a personal experience, that when I actually separated from that mentality, is when I was able to see that study and knowledge and learning is actually more beauteous than toiling for it or working for it or just rogue memorization of it or following the procedures of it or all those elements. That's where the crisis really lies, because psychologically what's being implemented, and this is a statement that's always made, and it's so subtle that we don't notice it, that children are not asked who they want to be in their life. They're always asked,
what do you want to be? Interesting. Yeah.
Right? It's an objectification of the self.
Yeah, very good.
I want to be a doctor.
More creative. You can. It's like that, but it's the same as Henry Ford, isn't it? You can have any color as long as it's black.
Right. It's a catch-22. So it feels like you're being given independence or liberty. Oh, I can be whatever I want to be. But the fact that whatever you want to be is just an object.
It's fine for you. Yeah.
Right. The Quran and Islam are opposed to that. The Quran and Islam teaches you, the human being, to reach the perfection of who you really are and what you were created, to achieve.
Yeah.
So, in Islam we say that everybody has an intellect, but everyone's intelligence is of a different level and a different orientation.
Yeah,
which is why some people are more inclined towards art and beautification, some are more scientific, some are more mathematical, some are more, everyone has a different balance. If you continually teach a fish to climb a tree, it's going to live its life thinking it's stupid. Right? So that's something that you spoke about, the systems that we have to follow, the educational systems. Like what you mentioned about Catholic schools, for example. I went to a Catholic school. I was in a Catholic high school as well. And I learned Christian theology as well, so I got a bit of both worlds. The other thing I wanted to also touch on is what Sister Nasiha said, that the learning of what we go through in school and university really needs to be distinguished from a Muslim point of view. That there is knowledge that is existential and then there is knowledge that is worldly. Imam al-Ghazali makes the distinction, and other scholars have made the distinction as well. Ilm al-mu'ammala, ilm al-mukashifa. Ilm al-mu'ammala is for amal, for demonstration, for worldly action. And then mukashifa is that which Allah reveals to really give you an understanding. And the learning of a career path or a job, this is something that the niyyah of the Muslim internally should be clear. What am I doing it for? Because if it's just job and career and because it pays well and you will settle well in that industry and that's just worldly accumulation. It's fard kifaya to earn, to follow that knowledge, because somebody has to do it in society to maintain the integrity of the society. We need doctors in our society, we need lawyers, we need accountants, we need all these different people, but that should not be seen as the zenith.
Absolutely.
I've got a PhD, that's the max I can go. There's nothing more beyond that. There's much more beyond that. But as far as existential knowledge that Islam brings about, knowledge of Islam, it's a vast ocean, and this vast ocean it depends on how it's perceived. So like I said, different people have different intellects, different intelligence levels, and different ways of viewing the world. So this is something Allah has created and has kept it like that. So we'll always have difference of opinions. We'll all have different perspectives. Imam al-Ghazali, in his book of knowledge, he distinguishes between righteous scholars and men who wear a scholarly garb. And there are four categories of people generally. There are those who know Allah and His ahkam, and those are the true scholars. And here the know is it's the end goal. It's the ma'rifah. So ilm is like, if you want to use an analogy, ilm is the goalpost, and then ma'rifah is getting the ball in there. That's arriving or scoring at it. That's ma'rifah, and that's understanding. That's what it is. Yes, okay, that's understanding. So it settles in the heart. So understanding Allah and then understanding His ahkam. And then there are people who know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala but not His ahkam. Those are people of fitrah. It's just intuitive in them to be righteous, to do righteousness. They don't necessarily need to know the specificities of fiqh and the technicalities and all those elements. Then there are people who know His ahkam but don't know Him. And these are the people of rogue memorization. These are the people whom Imam Malik describes. He said that ليس العلم بكثرة الرواية أو الحديث إنما العلم نور يرعى الله في القلوب. That ilm is not the rogue memorization of opinions and hadith. It is a nur that Allah places in the heart. So these kind of scholars, and these are the greater population of scholars that come out, the people who are in the garb of scholarship. They know the technical elements, they know the whole curriculum, they can pick out quotes for you and throw them out there and build different kind of fatwa and all that. But to truly understand Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His creation, why He put things the way they are, if we're dealing with circumstances in our modern age today, why are those circumstances in place? Why is the unfolding taking place the way it's taking place? You understand that, then it's very easy for you to find the right path. But that's why the ummah is in a state of crisis, because they have not yet reached the level of ma'rifah to be able to understand where they are and what direction they're going towards, and what are the various other elements surrounding them, and what is the right path. Right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who guides you. The hidayah that Allah would give is based on the right application of knowledge. Because knowledge itself ultimately has to be applied, otherwise it's useless. But then how it is applied is the guidance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give you. How that knowledge should be applied, in which direction, and for what benefit. The metaphysics of Arabic, of the language, if you look at ilm, Ain Lam Mim, and you switch out the Lam and Mim and you get Amal. So you can see that embedded in knowledge is the purpose of knowledge. The ilm is the knowledge, the Amal is the application of knowledge. And then when you switch the whole word around, you get Lama. So you can see that the outcome of application of knowledge is, and Lama means to shine or to glow. So the application of knowledge is the brilliancy. So you say that a person is brilliant when they have rightly done something or done it properly after having acquired that knowledge. Is a brilliant person. The same case applies to Islam and Muslims. When you rightly implement the knowledge you have acquired, now you're a person of nur, and that nur is shining through you. So The guidance is only Allah can give you that guidance. And if you're going to bring knowledge down to your level, and only through your deduction, then Allah will seal the heart.
There's the gap, there's the gap, exactly.
The Quran says, Surah Al-Muddathir, innahu fakkara wa qaddara qutila kayfa qaddara, that he thought and deliberated, so he see how he will be destroyed by his own deliberation. Because just generally the world the way it is, we think we know everything. And the experts of our industry, the experts of our education system, the experts who implement the system under the impression, their own self-delusion, that they know everything there is to know, and only they can regulate what others need to know.
There's also a hadith saying that they said in the past that I don't know was considered half of knowledge.
Exactly.
Understand, because I think because what that does is that it opens you up to be able to receive knowledge. I think I'm reading this book at the moment on it's on Bruce Lee and his philosophy and stuff. One of the things he talks about water and stuff. So he says that he tells the story of someone filling a cup, and then he fills it to its full, and basically says that you basically can't receive knowledge if you're already full. Right, so I butchered the story, but you get the point.
No, I mean, it's not just being full insofar as just being full of knowledge, it's also being full of the self.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
Exactly.
The ego,
When you have a problem, get rid of yourself, like empty yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? And so that you can receive more. One of the ways of emptying yourself is to have Iman. And Iman is opening yourself up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One of the oldest principles of knowledge in our tradition is that faith without knowledge is ignorance. Al-iman bidun al-ilm jahil. Right? If you don't open yourself up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, all that you acquire insofar as the educational system and whatever it is, whatever degrees you acquire is useless. It's pointless.
100%.
It will suffice you in acquiring your wealth in this world, but you have nothing to show on Yawm al-Qiyamah. The ultimate question then is asked, well, what's the solution? The beauty of Islam is that there is complexity in the sciences of Islam, but there is ultimate simplicity in understanding Islam itself. And the solution to everything existential to the human being is given by the Quran in exemplification. That when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave Adam knowledge, وَعَلَّمَ آدَمَ الْأَسْمَاءَ كُلَّهَا, taught Adam the names, all the names, and then he instructed the malaika to prostrate, to do sajda. The command obviously was not only to the malaika, it was also to Iblis, who was among in that company, and he refused. It's interesting to note, if you actually break down what transpired and visualize it, that Iblis, even though when he disobeyed at that point, he was not kicked out of the heavens at that point. There was still time. He was still given time to rectify himself or to come to his own self-realization. Even then he did not. He made things worse for himself. Ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala questioned him. And the questioning is also very interesting. He asked Iblis, he didn't ask him, why didn't you do it? Why didn't you just do what you were told to do? He asked him, very, very interesting, he asked him, Ma mana'aka alla tasjuda id amratka. He asked him, what prevented you from following my instruction? Yani, what prevented you from ultimately seeing the truth of what I brought about? And then Iblis, of course, went about his own logic, Ana khairum minhu, I'm better than him, so by logical deduction, you created me from fire. Everyone knows that fire is better than clay, so logically, I am better than him. But that prevention is what's being revealed by the Quran. The caption that comes out from the ayah is that Iblis was arrogant. And it's arrogance that prevented him from reaching that state of ma'rifah to understand what it is Allah has created, why He's created it. The society we live in, one of the most crucial elements that have really been brought down is humility. We live in a world of entitlement. Everyone thinks that they're entitled to everything. They're entitled to a beautiful life. They're entitled to a utopia. They're entitled to whatever facilities that the government is providing them because they pay taxes. They're entitled to education. The process of seeking knowledge ultimately is to reach to the truth, but not people don't want to make the effort to get there. They feel that they're entitled to the truth. And this entitlement is pride. It's egoistic. To think that you're entitled to the truth is an egoist, and that pride, that arrogance prevents a person from reaching a state of ma'rifah, a state of understanding. So solution-wise, the solution is not something from my understanding, my point of view. The solution is not something that can be implemented from an institutional point of view, or from the rectification of policies, or from the building of structures, or curriculums, or redesigning all those things. The solution begins with the self. If the self realizes that I need to bring down myself, lower my attitude, to allow Allah to guide me towards that state of ma'rifah. Doing it individually ultimately expands to doing it holistically. Right? And as a population, an ummah that follows, and there is only one book that we can follow. So even though there are differences of opinion, this solution that's in the Quran is valid for everyone. It doesn't matter if it's Sunni or Shia or Ismaili or whatever madhab they follow. The solution is universal. That if you bring this down, then you will be able to reach that state of ma'rifah. Humility, because knowledge is something that has to be asked. It's something that needs to be received, right? Knowledge is such that the soul arrives to meaning, and that's the first half of knowledge. That's the human effort. And then meaning arriving to the soul, that's the second half. That's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala giving. So we need to reach a place where we can ask Him so that He can give. And the only way you can ask is not out of arrogance, because arrogance demands. Humility is what asks.
Well, humility, basically, that's what you're saying. You're saying that in order to, step one of the solution, humble yourself.
Humble yourself, yeah.
Okay.
Because ultimately you have to admit that I don't know. Intelligence really has got boundaries. That's hudud of intelligence. Adnahu taraka dunya, the lowest level of intelligence is separation from the dunya. Separation from what you could call the causal nexus. Separation from just seeing the sabab and now seeing the musabbib, the one who is actually making things happen. And the highest level of the intellect, وَعَلَاهُ تَرَاكَ تَفَكَّرُوا فِي ذَاتِ اللَّهِ. The highest level is not contemplating the nature of God. Knowing God, knowing Him, He's the one who is the musabbib, but not contemplating His nature. This, you could say, traditionally is where the Mu'tazilites especially started going wrong, where some of the extreme Sufi started going wrong when they started, trying to contemplate the true nature of God. But true intelligence, where it begins, the separation from the causal nexus, true intelligence is knowing itself. Knowing yourself is knowing your intelligence and recognizing what is the difference between your desires and your intellect. What are the things that you need to cross over the bridge of life into the next life? And what are the things that are grounding you down or preventing you from moving forward? Making the distinction, and that's where you then learn to take the right path. Traditionally they would say that the pen is mightier than the sword. Right? I mean, that works on a social cultural level, but existentially we say that neither the pen is mighty nor is the sword mighty. Mighty is knowing when to use the pen and when to use the sword. Right? That is true intelligence.
That's the good.
And the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes it in the Quran when He says in Surah Nur, ayah number 35, Allahu nuru samawati wal ardh. He is the light of the heavens and the earth, and He begins by saying an example of that light. مَثَلُ نُورِهِ كَمِشْكَاتُ فِيهَا مِصْبَاحٌ. There is a niche, inside is a lamp. That lamp, that first step, that's the lamp of intelligence. That's where it begins. So everything in the world, or encompassing the knowledges of the world, whatever academic discipline one might have, that's the lower point. The first step is now bringing it into the self. Once you have emptied the self, now you bring it into the self, and that's where you now begin the journey of transcendence or ascendancy, going towards the hierarchy and going up until you reach the point whereby now you know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't know His true nature, but you know Him. And you know, you can see that He is the musabbib. He is the one who has created you, created everything. And that's ultimate recognition, right? The raja'a, returning back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when He says, Ya ayyatuhal nafsul mutma'inna, irji'i ila rabbiki. O you soul that is tranquil, that is at peace, return to your Lord. Right? And then fadkhuli fi ibadi wadkhuli jannati, enter among my servants and enter among my Jannah. This return, all the scholars are in agreement about this. Raja'a is to return to the state of knowing God alone. In that pre-state when He asked us the question, Alastu bi rabbikum, am I not your Lord? And we testify to that, Bala shahidna. And He's going to ask us about this on Yawm al-Qiyamah. It is returning back to that state. Imam al-Ghazali describes 4 kinds of intellect. I added a 5th kind of intellect to that. He says that the first kind is that fitra, the natural intellect. That thing that enables you to have a cognition of the world as soon as you enter it. And then comes the intuitive intellect that gives you that knowledge of things that no one can actually teach you. This is what Plato was trying to figure out. How do we know these things when no one...
Got instinct kind of thing, yeah.
Right, yeah. The two things cannot be in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? Or just that 1 and 1 is more than... that 2 is more than 1.
Yeah.
This is just intuitive. No one can teach you that. Then he says the third level is the intellect of learning and experience. That's where the academics take place. And he says the 4th level, which is the highest, is the level where the intellect is able to subdue the desire. That when a person is deliberating a decision in his life, he's able to see or foresee a certain outcome or set of outcomes through which he can make the right decision, and he's not faltering on just desire for the want to do something for the want, right? So that's the highest level of intellect. The 5th level that I added on is now the return back to fitrah. That's the highest level of intellect that a person can achieve, is to return back to that natural state of remembering what we forgot. Alastu bi rabbikum bala shahidna. Yes, you are indeed our Lord. So that's the highest level that you can reach to really know God. And there's a variance there between knowing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and knowing about Allah or knowing of Him. Right? So atheists know of Him as a subject of discussion, or as an object that they would just classify as somebody is up there, that these people believe in, that I don't believe in. Right? Sheikh Hamza made a joke once in one of his lectures. He says the atheists actually fulfill half the kalima. By saying La ilaha, they've already completed the first half. They just need to complete the second half, and they're actually more on a fitrah path than all these educated Muslims out there, because they're actually trying to know God. That debate that they're having is not just convincing others, they're trying to convince themselves. And the reason they keep failing to convince themselves is because they haven't yet come to face the truth of it.
And I guess they're also lacking that first element that you mentioned, which is humility. They're actually not going into that conversation in that humble state.
That's what's preventing them from seeing the truth, right? So that once that humility comes down, then you're on a journey to go forward. The ulama, the standard discipline that our ulama had from the very beginning, and this is something that we have completely forgotten ourselves. When Sister Safiya talked about we really need to bring about a change on a communal level, change of curriculum, change of everything basically, because even in our Islamic schooling systems, in our madrasas today, this entire concept of Islamic education or Islamic schooling, from our point of view, there's no such thing as Islamic education or Islamic schooling. It was all one and the same.
Yeah, absolutely. Harmonizing it. We need to harmonize it all.
Yeah.
Exactly.
The moment you try to put a partition, then you're trying to Islamicize secular works. You're trying to turn them into Islam. And you're trying to take things that you agree with and then discard things you don't agree with. I mean, that's there. That's a process that you have to go through. But if you look at it from the Islamic point of view, the Quran gives you scientific concepts, even though it's not a book of science. It gives you geological concepts. It's not a book of geology. It gives you cosmological, astronomical concepts. It's not a book of astronomy. The concepts are there.
What's quite interesting is just based on what you said. It's like I think Sheikh Umar Fadillah said this once. He goes that it's the same with banking. He goes that we put this Islamic banking in front of it, but you're trying to Islamicize something that is corrupted.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's like you drop a lollipop on the floor, you can pick it up and just try and take the things off it. No, you can't do that. It's
something about the 5-second rule or something.
Yeah, that's it. But
corruption. This thing about this, the thing they said has been corrupted. This is from an eschatological point of view. This is something that Ya'juj and Ma'juj are. That's their impetus, right? That's what the Quran describes. They are corruptors of the land. Now, whether people choose to accept it or not, that's up to them. But the fact is that their hand is in it.
Right? Of course, that's the modus operandi,
وَإِذَا قِيلَ لَهُمْ لَا تُفْسِدُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ قَالُوا إِنَّمَا نَحْنُ مُصْلِحُونَ. Oh, we're just do-gooders, we believe in freedom of speech and expression and, all that stuff. Salman al-Farsi, when he was asked, he said about these people, he says, لَمْ يَأْتِ بَعْدِ, that these are yet to come from that time onwards. That revelation was not for that. Days are yet to come. So all these corruption elements are what we're dealing with now. That the educational system is being corrupted. It's the lifestyle is being corrupted. The world view is being corrupted. That spiritual, there's a veil being placed deliberately to prevent people from seeing existential reality.
What we're talking about now is just the fact that spirituality has been taken out of education. Now there's an active effort to corrupt, because the whole RSC and LGBT and teaching that into schools and corrupting the youth and the young. I mean, that's a whole different topic, so we won't discuss it now, but I'm sure that we can discuss that in the future when we talk about educating children and stuff like that. But I think it's really, really spot on what you're saying. So
I just want to finish with just one piece of advice for all who are listening. How do you actually take the step forward from our Islamic tradition and Islamic epistemology, the epistemology that our ulama followed? And most of the time, the earlier ulama followed it intuitively. But they used to say that ahammu aqidatun, ahammu aqaidu thumma al-furu', tasawwufu alatu biha shuru'. That first you ground your aqidah, your belief system, and then you perfect and ensure that your performance of the deen is set properly and it's done properly. And then comes the purification of the heart, the tasawwuf portion. To purify the heart, to remove it of filth, to polish that glass that Surah Nur speaks about, the zujaja, right? Kawkabun, to make it a kawkab, yani clear and polished so that light can enter through, right? Glass in its natural state is opaque. When it goes through the process of refinement and polishing and clarifying it, then it allows light to pass through. So once you reach that point, that's when you actually begin the process of learning. And they say that al-Arabiyyatu miftahul ulum, that Arabic is the key to studying, to going through that path of knowledge. So my personal advice to now, all those who want to actually take this seriously and not just study for the sake of study, whatever their academic qualifications would be, to get into the Quran, Arabic language is a must. You cannot base an interpretation of the Quran from translation. You cannot derive wisdom from a translation. You cannot translate the Quran, period. Right? You can
that's true.
explanation of it, but you can't translate it. You need to know the language. What Sophia said about the modern system whereby they only want you to see A is the cause of B, and then that's that. It's actually interesting if you look at Surah Al-Kahf and draw the parallel of Ashab al-Kahf, where Allah says that the world is a zina. Ibn Ajiba said about this is that he said that the rising above of the intellect, he said khafiyun an absar lil mustamsikina bil asbab al adiya. He said it's veiled from the sights of those who cling to the world of causality, right?
Exactly.
That causal nexus is what you're talking about. And it's actually interesting, actually, if you'll allow me, I just want to add one more thing on that.
Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Prophet ﷺ said about our age today, and he also spoke about the state of the Muslims. And this is something we also need to be cautious about, that we're not above anything, that even though the Western world or secular world is doing whatever it's doing, we're not exempt from that either, because there are a lot of the larger population of Muslims is in a very gray area with regards to that. And he said, he told his Sahaba at the time, إِنَّكَ فِي زَمَانٍ كَثِيرٌ فُقَهَاؤُهُ قَلِيلٌ قُرَّاءَهُ. He said that you are in a time where there are many amongst you who are of understanding, even though there are few who can recite the Quran. And he said, تُفْعَدُ فِيهِ الْهُدُودُ الْقُرْآنِ وَتُضَيَّعُ حُرُوفُهُ. That you have understood, or in the Quran are preserved the hudud, the boundaries and limits and all the explanations, even though the huruf had not yet been set in their rightful place. But he also said that وَسَيَأْتِي عَلَى النَّاسِ زَمَانٌ قَلِيلٌ فُقَهَاؤُهُ كَثِيرٌ قُرَاءُهُ يُفْعَدُ فِيهِ الْحُرُوفُ الْقُرْآنِ وَتُضَيَّعُ حُدُودُهُ. He said that there'll come a time on mankind where the people of recitation will be so many, but its understanding will be so little, and they will master the huruf, the letters, but they will not encompass the hudud, the actual essence of the Quran. This is something we really need to think about from our point of view also, because we put a lot of emphasis in our Islamic educational system, a lot of emphasis on memorization, on hifz, and we assume that our youth who go for hifz, once they've done hifz al-Quran, that's it. They've understood what they need to understand and everything.
Yeah.
Scholars used to say, hifdu sitrain khayrun min qira'ati wiqrain. That memorizing 2 lines is better than reading 2 pages. But they also said, wa fahmu sitrain khayrun min hifdi wiqrain. Understanding 2 lines is better than memorizing 2 pages.